Hello everyone, Heba here. Thank you for being here today. I will be bringing you today a long-awaited video in which I will be deep diving into really fascinating topics. For the most part, I feel they will trigger a beginning of an inquiry for most of you viewing this video. So the purpose of this video is really to explore and raise points for consideration and comparison concerning teachings most of you would have heard about, some of you more than others, but pertaining specifically to the kabbalistic teachings in general, the tree of life specifically, and that's what I want to address more than anything else. And I would like to highlight the sharp distinctions between the Kabbalistic tree of life and the Kathara tree of life, also known as a Kathara Grid. So somehow this information is still considered mystical, it needs unveiling, I should say, and demystifying. So I will attempt to do that today. I'll attempt to also draw comparisons between aspects of the Kabbalah faith and the Kathara teachings, also known as freedom and Melchizedek, Cloister, Emerald Order teachings. Sometimes mistakenly the two are viewed as one and the same. So I will attempt to highlight the stark distinctions between the two and take you on a journey of discovery of so you can find out the original root of the infiltration that took place that resulted in the creation of this artificial tree of life and the system of teaching we call the Kabbalah. Significantly different to the original. And I feel like this will be somewhat a long video, but it will be worth it because it will be pregnant with key knowledge important to everyone, especially on the upward journey of ascension. If you've not heard of Kabbalah, it is a sub-sect and integral part of the Jewish mystical tradition or the Torah. It's considered a faith and is said to have begun in around 4,000 years ago from time of ancient Babylon. Kathara, on the other hand, is way older. It relates to the Kathara Grid, which is the core scalar template upon which our 15-dimensional anatomy is built. It goes way back to the CDT plate teachings that existed for millions of years and still do. The first attempt to translate those CDT holographic discs was in 246,000 BC. And they're an integral part of the Melchizedek, Cloister, Emerald Order and founder races teachings and of the original 12 tribes. Each of those holographic discs was protected and administered by an assigned Magi Grail king. The second attempt to translate the CDT teachings on Earth was approximately 22,340 BC, and in most recent periods around 10 BC, and 2040 BC and 10 BC. So the CDT plate teachings is talked here a lot. Is actually discussed here a lot on this channel, and in most recent translations, it's been taught in many workshops over the years between 1998 and 2011 by three primary Emerald Order assignees or speakers. CDT plate teachings are ancient history, though they appeared as sacred Maharata texts in many cultures, in Hinduism, in Hebrew, Chinese, Druidic, Tibetan, African, Mayan, Egyptian, Incan, Celtic, and many others. It's meant to be the foundational teachings of all religions, but something happened, and I will discuss that in the video, because what happened is, in brief, is a falsification, a massive violation, an inversion, and even a redaction of those sacred texts. So I'll be taking you down that rabbit hole. In this video, you'll come to understand the difference between the two configurations, and each one will affect your template differently because in truth, they differ significantly from each other. The genuine tree of life, the Kathara Grid, represents the organic core mathematical radiation, structures or geomancies or lattices that connect the 12 energetic points upon the eternal life living morphogenetic field. So that's like your matter template upon which all creation is built on. In this video, I will explain both structures and grids, and the primary objective is not to condemn anything or anyone or any teachings, but just to provide you with the information, educational purposes, and to raise awareness surrounding these important topics simply and logically. So I would like to make a disclaimer before I start that everything I say in this episode is my research and observations as well. So please arrive to your own conclusions and let these pointers raised today in this video be a start of your exploration journey and self-inquiry, not the final destiny point, not the arrival. Okay. In this segment, I'll be talking about the invader races also and what they did to invert, twist, and retract original CDT translations and teachings given to us by the original founder races of the 12 human tribes. I will be expounding on their purpose as well as highlight the direct relationship between the counterfeit teachings of the artificial tree of life, the black heart implant, the tesseract cube configuration, the underworld myths and stories that have kept humanity in mass hypnotic state for millions of years. I will be talking about the role of Thoth and his connection to all of this, the blue sword initiations, as well as many other agendas that ended up resulting in a convolution of human DNA and blocking the organic flow of energy, hence the natural ascension. So the Kabbalah teachings contain teachings supposedly for attainment of freedom, right? So like every other belief system, they all allude to one thing, okay? It's how to get the soul to be liberated, emancipated, and free from, going back home, basically going back to the source, going back to Creator. There's many systems of beliefs around the world that attempt to teach the main thing, this main belief, the core of it, which is what I said. All systems of beliefs are supposed to carry this core message, or at least have a similar intention, and to free souls from the suffering and to provide guidance for a joyful exploration of life, of one's beingness, of our true nature, and a true and organic ascension back to Creator Source. But what had actually occurred is something entirely different. In short, we were invaded and almost lost all teachings. The ones that we still have become almost entirely distorted. The kabbalistic teachings, I will start with the kabbalistic teachings, started with an ordinary man, an ordinary Bedouin named Abraham, the patriarch. This is one of the stories. Wrote the book called Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of creation or formation. So it discusses the formation of humanity from the beginning. Although I must say here that other sources say that the origin of the book remains unknown still, but other sources say it started with Abraham. It is said the eternal Creator revealed himself to Abraham and made a covenant between him and Abraham, between the 10 toes of his feet, which became the covenant of circumcision, and between the 10 fingers of his hand, which became the covenant of the tongue. So I'm supposing the tongue would be the manifestation of the word, and the circumcision would be the implants and the removal of the implants. I suppose that's the original meaning. But without going into the meaning of this, I just want to continue. So I offer you a little summary of what the core teachings in these texts really allude to. So then it says that he bound the 22 letters to Abraham's tongue, so that's the spoken word, and revealed his secret to Abraham. He drew them in water, burned them in fire, agitated them with the wind. He ignited them with the 7 planets, arranged them among the 12 constellations. It is said that Abraham printed 3 books with the 22 letters, which became the Hebrew alphabet, and created the entire universe with them. He formed all that was made and all that will be made in future. Okay, so it's alluding to the fact that the first man was Abraham. So in the Zohar, which is a primary text of the Kabbalah, it is written about the verse, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. There was light for this world, and there was light for the next world. The light was promised to those who practice the Torah and the mitzvah, lishma. They're rewarded with light at the end of days, during the end of days, after the end of the purification of the body in the path of the Torah. So what really begs a question here is what is said about light. Light, from what I understand, promised to those who practice the Torah. But why is there promises of light in the afterlife and not during the life? So this is something that I would question, is why would there be light during the after and not during the life itself? It seems like there is some form of delayed gratification, the light being the reward, instead of the light being the pointing to the source, to the self, and therefore the very nature of the beingness within each person. In this case, the seekers who are seeking the light, who are promised in the end times, will see the light. Christianity, Islam make such promises too in the afterlife, and to a lesser degree, Eastern philosophical teachings. It seems that they all have in common one thing, that the prerequisite to eternal happiness is faith. So it's like faith is the prerequisite to see any form of happiness or salvation. And according to these religious interpretations, light is only awarded to those who hold strong faith and practice acts of worship. Therefore, salvation is only offered to those who conform to the teachings, like it's only attainable by external means and validation. So in some words, it seems like the idea is to push the idea of salvation as something synonymous with faith, and to me that sounds counter-effective if one's actually seeking self-actualization. Now, if we compare that to the Kathara teachings and ascension mechanics provided in the Emerald Order Freedom teachings, there's no such promises made, because there is no delayed gratification, there is no reward, because the teachings of the Emerald Order and the Freedom teachings are based on expansion of one's inner light. So it's based on turning within, because the primal light and the sound are the essential particles that form and construct the grids, the Kathara grids, or the grids of consciousness upon which all creation and manifestation, including ourselves, is founded. So there is no promises to the afterlife, because that's within us, inherent in our codex. It's accessible to all of us. Shall the person choose to access it directly? Thus, the very nature of our existence is light, and so ignorance becomes absence of light, the unawareness of that which is inherently true, inherently innate, in different forms, various forms in the nature of all things. Gnosis and wisdom, on the other hand, is the direct connection to the self. So this makes seeking outside of oneself a moot point. Okay. Now, another point, I shall be making a few points for comparison. So in the Torah, the study of the 10 Sephiroth, students must pledge prior to the study to strengthen their faith in the Creator and His guidance. So Proverb 3:8 in the Torah says, "It shall be health to thy navel and marrow to thy bones," emphasizing here that the Lord must be obeyed in reward or in punishment. So there is that law, or that system of reward and punishment. Now let's compare that to the Kathara freedom teachings. The interesting word here is punishment. It is attributed to the Creator, though the Creator is the one inflicting that pain and punishment onto others. It is the creator of life we're referring to here, the punisher, the destroyer, the vengeful, wrathful God who punishes. Is that not so? In the Mahabharata text, there's absolutely no mention of punishment whatsoever. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Even those who seek darkness instead of light are invited, are encouraged, are supported to return to the Christic flame. And that's the part of themselves that they will find joy and fulfillment in. In fact, to support this claim, guardian races have been known to historically and to a great extent host fallen races amongst the Christic groups in order to help with the fallen races' spiritual Bio-regensis. This is utmost love and service to all. This, of course, goes without saying that there comes a time when this had to stop due to the repetitive offenses, acts of rebellion, destructions, warring, and behaviors that brought about the degeneration of the original human tribes. So ultimately, this helping hand was reducted. There's no longer help provided because of how these races ended up betraying the founder races. Now, the main point here is, although they were on a different path, you can say the path to service to self, they were still invited and assisted to host back into the eternal Christic path. Note, the Creator does not punish. Yet, kabbalistic texts speak of a God that punishes, judges, and inflicts pain on non-believers. You can start to formulate a clear picture here of other belief systems too, whether it's Islam, Christianity, and many others that, have the central idea is that there's a system of reward and punishment and a lot of them actually do this to gain memberships. So the system of belief looks like it's built on three main ideas. First, delayed gratification and promises of salvation. Two, fear-pushing tactics to inflict pain and punishment, to subjugate and gain following and control. And three, promising access to external forms of soul emancipation rather than encouraging an inner system, an inner process of alchemization and transcendence through inner grid works of consciousness in context. Emerald Order teachings, in contrast, hold the sacred law of one, and in the law of one, there is no place for elitism and hierarchy, regardless of one's choices, let alone detestation, judgment, and punishment. The Emerald Order is the unveiling of the hidden areas within one's consciousness. It's a path of learning and ultimately evolution. Learning goes hand in hand with evolution. It emphasizes responsibility as a main pillar, which is connected to the law of cause and effect. It's a scientific law based on true physics, that what we put out in terms of energy gets returned back to us. Therefore, every choice, good or bad, leads to a specific consequence that one must bear to serve his or her evolution. So it's not a reward or punishment system, rather a path of ultimate freedom, true liberation. So the path of the freedom teachings is actually the path to the self through the self, teaching the true ascension mechanics, upholding sacred three primary principles: 1, love; 2, free will; and 3, law of one. Another example is it is explained also that engagement in Torah and mitzvah correctly in its strict condition is to bestow contentment to one's maker and not for self-gratification. So that's just for the appeasement and the pleasing of the God creator, and not for one to enjoy being here alive. This is impossible to achieve, except, so this meaning happiness, the text says that it's impossible to achieve except through great labor and exertion in purifying the body. So it emphasizes that the first tactic to accustom oneself to not receive anything for one's pleasure even the necessary parts for existence of one's body, such as eating, drinking, sleeping, and other necessities. Thus, one will detach oneself completely from any pleasure that comes to him, even the necessities, in the fulfillment of one's sustenance, until he leads a sorrowful life in its literal meaning. And after one becomes accustomed to that, then his body possesses no desire to receive any pleasure for itself, because it is now possible for him to engage in the Torah and keep the mitzvah in that manner too, in order to bestow contentment upon his maker and not for its own pleasure. So when one acquires that, then one is rewarded with tasting the happy life, filled with goodness and delight without blemish of sorrow. So as you can see, the text emphasizes clearly complete surrender for seeking emancipation. The text urges the seeker to give up everything it wants and needs to attain goodness and delight, thus promising light at the end of the tunnel after a lifelong dedication, surrender, toil, penance, and hardship. This further illustrates my above-mentioned points. And so if we compare that to the Kathara teachings, Melchizedek, Cloister, Emerald Order teachings, specifically the 12 attitudes of mastery and responsibility, we will begin to understand the clear distinction between the texts, the teachings. Because there's something honored at all times, and it is individual free will. The outcome of choices, as these texts say, is determined pleasurable or unpleasurable by whether the seeker actually chooses the eternal life, which becomes the pleasurable experiences, versus a finite life where one will choose to go against the natural flow of things, and thus experiences become displeasurable. So this right here is a complete honoring of free will and individual choices. So now I will quote from the Voyages 1, page 50 to 51. Duality allows us the choice of following or working with the natural flow of evolution or against it. Each choice provides us a consequence of action. If those ideas move with the flow of evolution, we will experience a perceived state of ease, feelings of lightness and pleasure, and we will expand or grow into even greater reality fields. If we move against the flow of evolution, we will experience the opposite of these conditions. We will experience tension, heaviness, displeasure, and contraction as we digress into smaller fields of reality and identity. Both paths exist simultaneously. One implies the other. They exist together as parts of the greater whole that is dimensional reality. End of quote. So you can see here that free will is awarded to each individual. There are no promises, no external rewards to those who demonstrate faith and abandon pleasure. There is neither promises of salvation nor emancipation, only expansion and growth or contraction into smaller fields of reality. This is called energy mechanics. There are consequences to individual choices, and they sprout from within the person's consciousness, essentially, resulting in a culmination of a set of experiences that one ought to live out in pleasure or displeasure. Okay, in summary, it's an external process manifesting from internal individual choices alone that one has to essentially go through if one is resulting in his or her own choosing. So it's purely individual and based on individual choices. Free will is a gesture of love from the Creator, because even the dark flowering souls are encouraged and supported to return to the path of unity, the law of one, the path of eternal creation. There is no punishment or exclusion. The only exclusion, though, is based on one's own choices to either choose the path of evolution or devolution. And that goes without saying. It comes with accountability and responsibility for one's own evolution, and that should be priority on such a noble path. The freedom teaching honors the sacred gift of free will and honors choices made by each individual, and ultimately cause and effect is linked to the outcomes, creating experience of happiness or pleasure, sorrow and displeasure. Now I will like to delve into the origin of the Tree of Life, the meaning of Tree of Life in context to Kabbalah teachings and Kathara freedom teachings. Kabbalah talks about the meaning of conception of the soul and how it comes into the body. It explains that Kabbalists are rewarded with attaining all those degrees in reality that one can attain. This is considered that they've attained a matter in full, and that complete matter is called soul. So when person reaches full realization and have attained a matter in full, it's called a soul. They say the soul is the possession of Adam Harishon, meaning the first man, so Adam Kadmon. The soul is divided into many parts. Each part is an organ of the body of the first man. The soul, in fact, is the very same will to receive delight and pleasure, and its part are unique parts and are desires for reception of pleasures. Then the texts from the Kabbalah add that each soul contains 613 desires that the collective soul of the first man had before that soul sinned and broke into many pieces. So in Kabbalah, a sin means receiving pleasure for its own delight, as opposed to bringing contentment to the Creator. This was also the sin of Adam Harishon. As a result of this sin, his soul was divided into 600,000 separate parts, which came to be 600,000 individual souls, and each of those 600,000 souls consisted of 613 parts, also called desires. Now, those desires fell 125 degrees down from their original status, called the root of the soul. The last degree to which they fell is called the world. So the world is considered the lowest spiritual degree for the soul. And from that low state, a person must correct his or her own soul until it returns to the highest state, to the root of the soul. So essentially, it must rise 125 degrees to align, and it needs to be done in a gradual correction of the 613 desires. Thus, the 613 desires become the practice of all of the observances of the commandments as a whole, called the Tree of Life. So I will talk a bit more about the Tree of Life in Kabbalah versus Kathara Tree of Life. Now, how does that correction of the sins take place? So Kabbalistic texts say it is necessary to bring the souls further and further down until they reach the level of our world. So notice the key word here, necessary. For the soul to begin to rise to the degree of the Creator independently, it must completely detach from Him until it realizes Him. So it must drop below the degree of Cain and Abel, the generation of the flood, the Tower of Babel and Sodom, all the way down to the degree of the corporeal world. Now, what it says as well is that we're at the bottom of the ladder of degrees. And when the soul descends to the degree of our world and it's clothed in a body, it is completely detached from the Creator. It has no sensation of Him whatsoever. And then it thinks it's completely free. But if we begin to rise from this situation, we will really be correcting everything as a result. That is why the uniform soul of the first man had to be broken. Notice here the use of the word had to be broken. And the souls needed to be brought here to this degree of the world to begin the process of rising up again. Every human being is obligated to fix a portion of the transgression that Adam Harishon committed. Each person, therefore, must strive to fix the elements of transgression that he was a part of, for all of our souls were contained in the soul of the first man, Adam Harishon. If a person does not act with responsibility and correctly carry out all that's required of him, materially, spiritually, conceptually, and emotionally, perceptively and experientially, he not only misses his tikkun, but also delays, which is the completion, but also misses out the delays of the whole entire world to arrive to its fulfillment. It's like a common destiny. So delaying the final tikkun delays the Creator from revealing himself and ruling over the repaired and refined vessels, as is befitting for the kings of kings. Okay, that's a lot to take in, but I just want to summarize the main points. Three main points. Soul is the highest form of man. That's what these texts say, that soul is the highest forms of man. It's represented as divine, whereas the body is sinful. That's what it clearly says. 2, the lowest point of consciousness, sodomy, is described as necessary for emancipation. 3, Adam Harishon represents the collective consciousness, sinful actions. And so this again begs many questions. Why is man, supposedly made the image of God, deemed sinful? Why will God reveal himself only when transgressions and sins are repaired, and not when there is a need for guidance to reach the ultimate fulfillment? And why are souls deemed sacred, yet contained in the soul of Adam Harishon, who apparently committed the transgression? So there's a few points to ponder upon here, because to me it doesn't make sense at all. And I think in this video you will begin to understand why these texts say these things and what it's trying to do. So basically, putting in a nutshell, it's infiltration, and it's just mixed messages in order to keep us into the world of the physical, the material world. And I'll expound more on that in a minute. So let's compare what I just said about the soul to the Kathara Emerald Covenant model of creation. Do these questions apply, or do they become redundant? Well, let's see. Kathara Emerald Covenant model of creation is based on the principle of man born in the image of God with potential of eternal life creation. So the cosmos has sets of spirit bodies and light body anatomy that follows the Kathara Grid, the 12 spheres that pull into the center to God source like bubbles within bubbles, all connected. Now, the Adashis are the ones who ascended the cycle of return and have returned eternally back to source. So ascension mechanics really to teach us the path to evolution. It's a map of the cosmos to ascend, a personal responsibility, but also a birthright. See, in Christic teachings, there's no fear. There's only encouragement towards the embodiment of responsibilities of mastery. Ashayana Dean says, and I quote, "There is a power in responsibility. If you want the power, you need to take the responsibility," unquote. So, to me, holding an entire race responsible for correcting the sins of Adam Kadmon is hardly effective, is hardly a solution. Rather, in my personal opinion, a tactic to control and subjugate. Emerald Order teachings state no such thing. No conditions are laid out because free will is honored and held sacred within the law of one. The crystal spiral, built on the original Kathara Grid, emerges from the center point of creation, to which it retains a living, expanding, and contracting perpetually through its connection to source. So let's explore this in greater detail. Now I will address and talk about Tree of Life, specifically difference between the Christic spiral, and that represents the Kathara template, the original tree of life, and the kabbalistic artificial tree of life that uses a golden mean Fibonacci spiral to represent it. So let's now look at the differences. The difference between crystal spiral and sequence and the golden mean Fibonacci spiral and sequence can be simply understood in terms of its connection and relationship to creation points within the grid. So the crystal spiral emerges from the center point of creation, to which it perpetually retains a living and a breathing. So think of a living being that's always breathing, expanding and contracting perpetually, okay? And it expands through multiplication of what's come before, Anyway, I'll expand that in a minute, because I want to just quickly move on to the Fibonacci sequence. It, in contrast, emerges from a point of adhesion to a living, breathing form. It doesn't multiply. It is connected to something that is already living, and it becomes attached to it. And as long as it's attached to it, it's breathing. When it loses contact with it, it stops. So it's a finite creation. The way it sustains itself is through consumption and annihilation of that which has come before it. So it has to destroy something in order to gain its energy to sustain itself. The Kathara spiral is always perpetually connected to the source of creation, to point zero, to the Manu field, which means it's always got an not infinite, perpetual supply of energy. So the kabbalistic tree of life is based on the Fibonacci spiral, Fibonacci spiral, and the counterfeit flower of life, which is also called the daisy of death, which I will also discuss during this video. The kabbalistic tree of life is based on the 10, what is called as Sephiroth, okay, or Sephirah is individual, plural is Sephiroth. They're arranged in 3 pillars, so you can see up here. There's a masculine right side, which represents the giving. There's a feminine, which represents receiving and passivity. And there's a middle, which is the balance. There are 3 distinct pillars exist in the tree of life, or the Kabbalah. The right pillar of expansion, the left is constriction, the middle pillar balances and harmonizes between the 2 dualistic forces or opposites. Now, these 3 lines are called kindness, mercy, and judgment. Judgment, the right pillar is referred to as masculine, the left is feminine, and the right pillar is the aspect of giving. The right pillar is the aspect of giving, and the left is receiving. So we have a situation of 2 opposites, and reconciled and harmonized by a 3rd principle that unites the 2. Now, what's interesting here is judgment being one of the pillars, meaning that there is some form of governance or government controlling this polarity and duality system, and not to mention a hierarchical system. So the Kabbalah describes human beings as limited, contrary to the Creator, which is unlimited. Okay? So we have a very clear distinction here, because the 3 pillars in the Kathara Grid mean something very different. So I will touch on that in a minute. So let's look closely at the meaning of the soul in the Christic teachings, because according to the Christic teachings, there is no hierarchy in terms of lowest versus highest on the creation ladder, as in physical, spiritual, interdimensional, extra-dimensional. Rather, the only difference lies in the degrees of awareness that each soul possesses, and how far it's come to know itself, how close to the Creator it's come. Each person has a birthright to choose its own path, honoring the birthright gift of free will, and holds sovereignty over his or her own choices and what's best for it. So two paths of in the Christic teachings, there's two paths, path of evolution and there's a path of devolution. The path in the middle is stagnation and static, and ultimately does not evolve because it's phase locked. So any person's evolution is ultimately based on the decisions they take for freedom or towards control within the Kathara model prior to it being invaded universally and cosmically, and always represents an upward journey. The downfall, the stepping down or stepping back, is not a natural thing within the Christic system. Unlike the kabbalistic texts that say that coming down to the lowest point of consciousness is much needed. That's not in the Christic teachings. It does not say that. The Kathara Grid is the core scalar template upon which our 15-dimensional anatomy, human anatomy, is built. So the CDT plates, the Cloister Terra holographic disc, store the information that we need for our ascension. It, in fact, represents humanity's legacy for spiritual actualization and knowing our intended heritage of mastery within the 15-dimensional time matrix, aka completing the ascension through the Kathara universal and cosmic grid works of consciousness. The CDT plate teaches us the true nature of God, the creation physics by which God seeds life into the space-time matter experience, and details the intimate relationship between consciousness, energy, biology, which beings are perpetually connected to God force. The CDT plates teach a pre-ancient model of creation mechanics called the stair-step creation, which details a primal order, the structure, ongoing dynamics by and through which consciousness manifests within the space-time matter experience. Now, expounding on the Kathara Grid structure. So in the Kathara Grid structure, as you can see here, we have a 12-point diagram, universal, and there's another cosmic one, which is a 24-point cosmic diagram. They serve as maps to understanding the core energetic relationship or relationships between the 12 dimensions of energy that exist between densities 1 to 4. And also the understanding of relationship of energy between dimensions 13 and 15 or the energy matrix structure. We call this density 5. The Kathara Grid is expressed on a macrocosmic and a microcosmic scale. On the macrocosmic level, there's two 12-point grids, Kathara grids, that are interconnected. On the cosmic and universal level, we have 24 points, and it's considered the primary path of transmission of the Kundare, Kirashe, Maharata, and Antakarana. So they're the levels 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 dimensions, primal light and primal sound field currents that enter the fields of manifestation in and through the time matrix. Just as there is a cosmic and universal, there's also much smaller Kathara grids within them. So they're between galaxies, planets, and individual beings that want to, obviously go from one density to the next. This is a genuine Kathara grid. It represents an organic core mathematical radiation structures or lattices upon which eternal life, morphogenetic field or living morphogenetic field, matter templates are built. The organic Kathara grid features 12 signets or power points. So these power points that you see are 12, and they're placed in very specific positions within a crossbar lattice, very specific proportions. These are proportions and relationships depicted in this represent mathematical formula of organized radiation structure through which organic living matter, light, and biology are formed. So the crystal spiral has a place in this Kathara grid. It's directly related with the Kathara Grid. And it has a permanent relationship with its own center point of creation. So it stems right from the center point of creation. Whereas the Fibonacci golden mean spiral is based on the geometries of the golden mean rectangle, has instead of a central point, has a decentralized start point of expansion rather than a center point. So the organic Kathara Grid is not a theoretical invention, but a depiction of the core organizational structure upon which the organic living matter and living life cosmos is and has always been formed. So yeah, the organic grid and what it represents is a part of the organic natural law of physics. So it's intimately related to science, true science, and it's inherent to the eternal, to the multidimensional living cosmos and the unified field of energy and consciousness within which the cosmos resides. Now, the artificial structure. In the kabbalistic diagram, the true Kathara has 12 grids rather than 10 or 11 primary points. So these distortions of the CDT plate Kathara Grid symbol became known as death sciences of the Atlantean period as the tree of artificial life, because it houses inorganic, finite life, artificial structures of matter, of light, and a biology. They created it by twisting the original mathematical structures implied by the symbolic structure of the tree of artificial life distortion that became known as the Kabbalah tree of life. There's also a tree of artificial life. So this artificial grid symbolizes and represents a distorted, a contrived, inorganic creation formula through which unnatural, multidimensional radiation template structures can be artificially created, so they bend sound and light to be able to get it through the grid instead of natural that comes directly from creator source. So in other words, they abuse the natural laws of multidimensional physics. Yes, they abuse the natural laws of multidimensional physics. Why? In order to harness the direct source of creation, and they manipulated dark matter and subatomical particles in order to form an inorganic, finite life, artificial structures of light, radiation, and biological form. Further distortions of the artificial tree of life symbols emerged later, depicting 7, 8, 9, or 10 signet points with different crossbar lattices distortions. These later Kathara Grid distortions represented renditions of the Atlantean tree of artificial life creation formula used by various Illuminati groups, and they used it for fulfilling their agendas of doom and gloom. All such Kathara Grid distortions represent, in fact, attempts to create an unnatural life sustained by artificial forms that deviate from the organic structures and the natural law of physics, natural law of energy, and natural laws of consciousness inherent to the eternal living cosmos. Now, the race responsible for reversing the Kathara tree of life is the Jehovian Neophyte Draconian race. There's many others. The main one is the Jehovian Neophyte Draconians. Now I will speak to that. I will speak to the invader races and what they did to create this distortion. Just have a sip of water. Now, these races brought about the Adam Kadmon teachings, which fall under Jehovian Anunnaki teachings. And I want to say that the Hebrew race was actually originally a true Magi Grey line and one of the original 12 tribes. I'll explain that in a little while. But essentially, Jehovah Anunnakis are the fallen Anu, Elohim, Giovanni collective, or D12 avatar collective. One of their races, the Jehovah Neophytes, are the ones responsible for the 7 Jehovah seals. So, that meditation you do to remove Jehovah seals, well, that's thanks to them, okay? They're dragon and falcon APINs as well. That's their creation. So APIN means Atlantean Pylon Interface Networks. There's another Jehovian race associated with the Adam Kadmon as well, called the Jehovian Neophyte Adam Kadmon Niburian Sons of Belial. And there's some other ones associated with Adam Kadmon, and they are the Noasim king, Enochian, Zadochim, Thoth, Enki, Zephylium, Israel, Bilai, Kadmon, Niburian hybrid group. The Lhasa king, the Enochian, Noasim, Adam Kadmon, Thoth, Enki, Ezrael, Sanjazi, Luciferian, Sakyon, Atalam. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Then there's the Davidic king, which are the Knights Templar, Enochian, Thothian, Hyksos, the Abraham, David, Moses, Akhenaton, Jeshua 9 lineage, Atlantean, Adam Kadmon, Neophyte, Leviathan, Illuminati lines. Oh, there's so many. So anyway, we don't have to worry too much about the names as long as we know they all fall under Jehovian Anunnakis. But these races actually infiltrated the human tribes, the 12 original human tribes, the angelic human tribes. I'll name these tribes now. We have the angelic human Hebrews, the Hebrew Melchizedek Cloister, the Essans, which are the Melchizedek Cloister Indigo Magi Grail lines in Egypt, ancient Egypt. There was a moderate infiltration of the Yus, the Chinese and the Tibetan, Sumerian, Egyptian, Middle Eastern cultures, all American and European cultures. So I will name them all in just a minute. There was distorted text of the original CDT plates made by the Jehovian Anunnakis. There were Christian, Protestant distortions, Templar, Melchizedek, Mormon texts were distorted, the YHWY collective, the YHWY Jehovian God stories, the false 12 tribe history in Hebrew and Christianity texts, the New Age teachings that promote channeling Metatron, the Archangel Michael, the Jehovah, the Enoch, and the Tibetan creeds. So the race responsible for reversing the Kathara tree of life are the Jehovian Neophyte Draconian. They created the Kabbalah Hebrew text distortions and inverted and reversed the original tree of life into what became the 10 Sephiroth. And also they removed the 6 letters from the Hebrew alphabet. So they've done a lot of lovely work. Now, further, the flower of life and the seed of life are linked by New Age authors with the biblical prophet Enoch, Archangel Metatron, 6 days of creation, the Vesica Pisces religion symbol, and the Borromean rings. Not quite sure what that is. I think I knew at one point and I've forgotten what they are. Anyway, we'll look it up. The Kabbalah tree of life is derived from the flower of life, and this is what's commonly referred to. This is what's commonly referred to as a flower of life these days. So if you look at flower of life, what you're getting the daisy of death, and it's passed as some sacred geometry. The symbol of the tree of life may be derived from the design of the flower of life, and it's studied as part of the Kabbalah text. So in the flower of life pattern, there are a set of 60-degree pattern. It's an unnatural energetic geometrical relationship because it prevents the spheres from phasing correctly with the top sphere, thus preventing a preventing a backflow into God source. So they can't breathe. So when spheres can't phase and spark, they become cut off from the natural supply of eternal life currents. Thus, it becomes metatronic. So anything that's not natural is metatronic, because metatronic's like a code word for technology, AI, the beast system, the beast mechanism, the flaming sword of Archangel Michael, anything that's inorganic. Now, the Metatronic code is also based on the Vesica Pisces. So instead of a 3 Triveca Merkaba, it's only a 2-unit Merkaba, which is locked into a 55 charge, which basically is static energy renewing, not eternal energy. So, yeah, once you spot that 60-degree diagonal flower of death, you can easily differentiate between the Christic, which is a 45-degree structure, and the Metatronic. By the way, most crop circles that you see out there as pastors or, some advanced alien race, created the crop circle to signify that we're on this path of ascension and that we're all going to be saved and whatnot. So actually these circles are based on the flower of death geometry of 60 degrees. So yeah, when you see them, you know what the agenda behind them is. It's basically a soul harvesting network. It forces people's Merkabas to spin in a certain way. And what it does, essentially, it prevents ascension. Unless deprogrammed, which we can deprogram anything that's reversed, we can deprogram it. But yeah, it's a method and a paradigm to take the soul as opposed to giving. So a little bit background about the Hebrews. The Hebrews were one of the 12 grey lines. But then what's become of that grey line, that race? Who's responsible for infiltration and the twisting, reversing, in many cases completely erasing the CDT plate translations and teachings of the original tree of life? Just like every other race on earth, the Hebrew race was tricked and invaded like all the other 11 races. So basically what happened in 8,900 BC, the CDT plate, which again translates to Cloister, Torah, Terra, if you like, what that means, it's Cloister teachings about the soul, ascension mechanics, and the nature of the soul and creation. So it's all information that we need right now more than any other time. I suppose they've always needed those teachings, but yeah, right now, big things are happening. We need them more than ever. And we were fortunate to have received them as well. These are part of the teachings from the CDT plates, by the way. So in 8,900 BC, they were attempted within the Hebrew grey lines of Sumerian Ur to be translated to the people there, only to be rapidly confiscated and redacted, by the false Sumerian Babylonian creator god control dogmas, which, the Jehovian, the Sirius A Anunnaki, and the Hebrew Draconian Illuminati Dominion forces were responsible for. Now, portions of the Sumerian CDT plate teachings were morphed into control dogmas, started in Atlantis, the original Jewish grey line text, and then combined many distortions that became falsified Kabbalah Semitic texts, which created more and more dogmas. And then you have all the other religions that followed, and then you have the 10 Commandments and various other stories that all become falsified. The various Illuminati legions were always responsible for the falsification of the once sacred Buddhaic, Semitic, Sumerian, Egyptian, Celtic, Druidic, and Hindu texts. So once upon a time, they were pure and sacred because they were direct from the Mahabharata texts. They did the same, by the way, to the Ramavita grey lines of India. And, I'll actually mention, so they did the Ramavita grey lines of India, the Mua Inca grey lines of Machu Picchu, the Celtic grey lines of England, Ireland and Scotland, and the Ceres Egyptians grey lines of Egypt, Chinese and Tibetan grey lines, and they're called the U grey lines, the Maya grey lines, the Mayans, the Persians of Iraq, Jordan, and Iran, and of course the American Seminole and the Hopi tribe grey lines, or the Brua Atlantis and Lemurian descent, the Mua Lemurian descent, the Mua Inca tribes of Peru, the Alaskan Canadian Inuit grey line tribes, North and South American grey line tribes, the Azurta Arutas, the Celtic Druidic grey lines of England and Ireland, the Kathara grey line races of southern France, and South African grey lines. So there's 12 all up. And the infiltration started around 10,000 BC, starting with the Chinese and Tibetan U grey lines. Now, each of those Christa founder races attempted to return the Emerald Covenant plate Christos freedom teachings, but they were rapidly met with a fallen angelic Illuminati race that interfered, and they were confiscated, those teachings. And not only that, but these grey lines were also persecuted as Templar quests. And so each of those teachings was sacred and hold a part of that global Christos teaching. Like I said, once were sacred earth religions before becoming falsified, infiltrated, inverted, and in some cases completely erased, like in the case of ascension mechanics. That's why we haven't heard of ascension mechanics until now. And the only thing we know of ascension is through New Age, which is completely falsified too. So none of the edited texts, none of these texts actually teach true ascension mechanics like the freedom teachings. Now, Hermes is closely related to the teachings of Thoth, not himself, but his teachings closely related to the Thothian or Thothian teachings, and they both defected from the Emerald Covenant. Thoth was nearly an ascended master. He reached 11.5 activation on the DNA, his DNA and template, but then he decided to join the Anunnakis. He was a Jehovian Illuminati bloodline. He persecuted the angelic human tribe, especially the Ianis, who in fact were annihilated. He wiped all of them out. So Thoth is said to have taught the Melchizedek group teachings. They inverted the tree of life, which we know today to be the Sephiroth. Now, before the Luciferian rebellion, the true motivation of Thoth's allegiance was to further the Niburian Anunnaki dominion agendas of Enki and Enlil, to completely annihilate the Christos genetic imprint or template so that he can take over the entire solar system. Thoth is known to have defected from the Emerald Order, also known as the Emerald Covenant, by the way. Now, the dangerous thing that he did, he played a very dangerous game. He initiated the blue flame sword of Archangel Michael. Basically, frequency, think of frequency, representing a cross and its sword, if you like, pulling energy from one of the most dangerous matrices out there, completely fallen. It's called the Wizardek system, and bringing that frequency into the people of ancient Egypt, mind you, the unsuspecting Melchizedek groups, who were just pure groups of people who were trying to ascend and evolve, but they were unsuspecting. They didn't know the true intention of the Thothian's initiation. And what he would do is he tethered these people that accepted the initiation into the Metatronic power and the pattern of the daisy of death, so not the proper tree of life. And so Hermes Trismegismus, he's basically Thoth. They have the same teachings, of course. Hermes is the Roman and Greek equivalent to Thoth. He's mentioned in the mythos of the Roman and Greek. Both are the portions of the Illuminati fallen angelic religious dogmas. They both created those commandments and falsified the Mahabharata texts. And so Thoth is a Luciferian architect of also what is called as NDCG, which is Niburian Diodic Crystal Grids on Earth. He set up a disruptive sonic checkerboard mutation, frequency fences through these grids. So think of the checkerboard, white and black. You've seen it everywhere, of course. This represents frequency fences, so people can't ascend because of the mutations in their genetics. That's what these checkerboard represent. This is called the spider web of control, or the star of Ishtar/Isis. Yeah. So the net stands for Nibiru electrostatic transduction. So how it happened is in 790 BC, an attempt was made to bring the CDT teachings or translations to the Ionian Italic grey lines of what became Rome and Paxos Island, Greece. So the Ionian CDT plate translations spurred aggression, retaliation from various competing Illuminati collectives who drove grey lines into progressive submission and persecution, confiscating CDT plate translations to create a variety of competing religious dogmas upon which Roman and Greek cultures were later structured. So that's how it happened. It's culminated in full Illuminati invasion and subjugation of Rome between 42 and 26 BC. Okay, and we all know the story of the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. So yeah, from there on, they took full control, and they still do. So how do we know the difference? How can we bio-regenerate a Kathara template? Now, we must do a number of things, as I've mentioned many times in my previous podcast. The main thing is clearing the heart of Anubis, the black heart of Anubis. It's another implant they put in the heart. You can see here in the kabbalistic artificial tree of life, there's a removal of the heart. There's a removal of that central. So you can see 1, 2, 3. There's nothing here. It's missing. There's a removal of the heart. So that's something that we retain in the Kathara Grid, but we must purify and remove the heart of Anubis and unlock the Tesseract cube. Let me explain what these mean and provide techniques to remove these distortions and mutations for your template. First, Anubis. Who is Anubis, and what does the black heart of Anubis mean? Essentially, Anubis is an Egyptian god of death. He was a jackal-headed deity guarding the gates of death that guided the souls and the dead kings to the afterlife. So he was called the Lord of the silent land of the West, or Lord of the underworld. They were judged by Osiris through the weighing of the heart, and Anubis he would accompany the dead to protect them, and he's considered one of the most important gods in ancient Egyptian history. he actually passes you down through the black sun underworld portals to his portals, which are the temple of Anubis or the astral world. So is he protecting you? Yes, of course. You can arrive safely, but to where? To a place where the soul is snatched, because that's what they're about, right? And he was always represented with a cross or a caduceus in his hand. Okay, so when you see a caduceus, you know that's an Illuminati bloodline. His followers say that the caduceus represented early symbols of regeneration or procreation, but it actually represents the brotherhood of the snake and the Illuminati bloodlines. In most of his attributes, Anubis is a lunar power connected to the lunar network. We know that's connected to Baphomet, the lunar network, directed to the Vatican. And it's further emphasized by his being a guide of the dead. Also identified with Hermes being the psychopomp who accompanies the souls after death. Another one that I find fascinating is the watchdog known as Cerberus. So Cerberus in the Greek mythos is depicted as a monstrous, fearsome, three-headed dog from the Greek mythos who protects the underworld to ensure no soul leaves once it enters the underworld. He will devour those who try to escape, and only the dead can get in. It is said that he had 50 snakes growing on his back and a serpent's tail. So as you can see, mythical characters, mythical, real, who knows. The depictions are rather scary though. They're trickster, they're judgmental gods of the underworld, real or mythical, not sure. But it just proves one thing, that fear is real. It's just another program that they've successfully put into our human mind, into the root of the subconscious and the unconscious, and it plays a very important role, detrimental role, on our ascension, preventing our ascension and evolution. Majority of humans forget to live because they're crippling fear of death. It's problematic because people have not been given the correct gnosis pertaining to death. So there is no such thing as death. Death simply is a mere transition from one form to another form as the freedom teachings expound. So yeah, fear, in my opinion, is an acquired energetic construct. It violates life and it keeps the soul at mercy of an unknown force, a voice that can easily threaten its survival. Now, when we can realize that there is no discontinuity, there is no end to anything, fear becomes a thing from the past. It's relinquished. In the freedom teaching, fearlessness is one of the actual attitudes of mastery. Its attainment is in the recognition that everything is happening in the field of God and can only happen in the field of God. No one will be trapped in the underworld unless they so wish. So the Creator is within us all, and we always return to the field of creation, of eternal creation, if so we choose. The attainment of a fearless state is promoted by way of recognition and remembrance of the eternal, infinite nature and unconditional love of the all oneness. Okay, we're coming to the last segment, and this is where I'll summarize everything and I'll take you deeper, and I'll also offer solutions to reclaim the messianic radial rishik body. So I invite you to, at this point, to remember who you are, okay, and to truly feel your beingness. Feel yourself free and make an affirmation: I am free, I am free, I am free. You have to do that regularly because this is considered a linguistic template reprogramming. We're telling ourselves we're not slaves to the dark. We are free. Remember that. Remember who you are and free yourself from the snares and the nets. It's not sufficient to just know the difference and you're free. You have to reclaim your Mashiach blueprint, your Rishik body, your radial body. You need to rise above the dualistic programming, and that's something I talked about extensively in podcast. I think it's the Unplugging from the Hive Mind. I spoke about this many times, about the importance of shadow integration and inner child healing, activating the light body, using flame body, Emerald Covenant, Bio-regensis techniques. These techniques work. These are teachings from the CDT plates. They're ancient, they're not new, they work. In fact, they work to provide a flame body activation for ascension. What that means is you're not having to answer to anybody. You're bypassing Anubis, bypassing all those gatekeepers, because we're not slaves for the dark agents. This scares them, this scares the Illuminati races. Our freedom scares them because they cannot fathom the freedom the way we do. They don't understand what freedom is. They need our Merkabas to get a little inkling of that freedom that they yearn for. So yeah, people like us, they dread everyone who's on the reclamation path, who's on the path of eternal life. That's why they create fake gods. It's understandable, because they have to create a fake god to act as a harbinger for souls so that can sustain themselves, because everyone fears annihilation. So yeah, they create Anubis, they create Thoth or Toth, the psychopomp, and Cerberus. Yeah. I would also like to note that Toth is actually slaughtered the Yanis, and he deemed everyone preaching the sacred teachings like we are doing. He punished by torture and death anyone teaching these sacred teachings. Now, these sacred teachings are the flame body activations. They're here. They're given to us now to activate and move through the portals, through the arcs, to connect directly with the eternal gates from whence we came. In other words, return home. Our home as indigos and humans. Some will not clear the heart of Anubis. Some will not be able to clear the heart. But to clear the heart of Anubis, you must remove it using the Emerald and Amethyst Awakening activation. It's found on our YouTube channel. It's provided by the Emerald Order teachings. Some will not hear the call, and that's sad. Those whose templates drop below 30%, but I've also seen references to 31 to 33%. Christic imprint will disconnect from the upward spiral of the eternal tree of life, because they unfortunately fall through the nets, the Niburian electrostatic transduction network that's artificially put into our organic networks. Like I said, checkerboard mutation to mutate the right energy flowing through our inner grid works of consciousness. It's fueled by this artificial 10th Sephirah, artificial tree of life. So it's a fallen framework that siphons life force from the Wizardek black hole system, run by dark agents like Enlil and Enki, Toth and Marduk. And so this is what's meant by the black heart implant, the heart of Anubis, the 10th Sephirah tree of life, taking out from the core the heart. And without a heart, what are we without a heart? The heart is the core of who we are. If you look at the Kathara tree of life, the dark heart implant if you compare it to the Kathara tree of life, their one is lacking the heart. And so in order for us to siphon our energy, they put the black heart implant into the Kathara grid. So yeah, theirs runs on poison apple 55, Fibonacci, death spiral mechanics, which I've spoken to extensively in other podcasts. Now, Islam, Christianity, the problem is they don't see the connection to the kabbalistic tree of life. But the truth is they're all connected to the same configuration. They're connected to the YHWY cube matrix. It's called the tesseract because it's a cube. It's a black cube geometry, and it's designed to keep us triangulated in physical. So remember the kabbalistic reference of the word sodomy, the lowest point of which a soul reaches to make corrections. So it's saying that we should come to the bottom, reach the bottom in order to rise up. Well, no, I don't agree with that. Why? Why do we have to reach the lowest to make it on the upward spiral? Anyway, it gets taken at that point when you're at your lowest and absorbed into the YHWY matrix, and that's why they want us to go down to the bottom in order to be sucked into the YHWY cube matrix, hive mind AI programming, like we're witnessing now, happening right now. People are at the lowest point of their consciousness, being sucked into the cube, the tesseract cube matrix of YHWY through sexual misery program, through Armageddon software, through victimizer, so many others. Religion has done a great job siphoning energy into the black cube and feeding it. There's also the Kaaba worship, okay, the Teflon black cube, pineal and crown parasites. They strip the cube onto the foreheads. Of course, the crucifixion in Christianity that I've expounded on in the video called J-seal removal, third eye activation. Yeah, so they all represent crucifixions of some sort. The crucifixion in Christianity represents the black heart implant anchored to the beast system, blank state technology, which locks the Merkaba, the organic Merkaba, to align with the fallen Wizardek and the Wizardrak black hole systems for hijacking, for mind control and Lush energy. Yeah, so in essence, and to end the segment, I want to end it on an encouraging note. Remember who you are once again. We're not victims, we're not trapped, we're not powerless. If you choose to activate your temple, that is. I heard someone say on their YouTube channel that you don't need to do anything, you just sit there where you are and receive. Of course, I completely disagree with that, because once upon a time we could just sit and exist, but not in a metatronic pattern, not when we're entrapped in that metatronic pattern and we're rolling down with that Fibonacci sequence and it's just taking us with it. We need to circumvent these efforts to have us lushed into that system, the beast system or the tesseract black cube. We need to get up literally and start doing activations. We need to activate the temple. Remember that the keys to eternal life are right inside you, and make that your daily mantra. That becomes the linguistic template programming. I am powerful. I'm not a victim. I am free. These words will rewire your brain. Instead of telling yourself that you are a victim, that you're sick, that you're unwell, that you're trapped, that you're in a matrix, that you're powerless, that you can't change, that you can't control things, that you can't control your mind, tell yourself otherwise. Tell yourself that you are capable of doing all of that. You're capable of change. You're capable of creating your life. You are the cause and the effect. You can rewire your brain and you can override all sorts of programming. Okay, now I have a written sequence for the techniques. I've provided it for free. I will not go through the sequence here. However, in brief, one needs to ensure that the black heart of Anubis is removed. So Emerald and Amethyst Awakening Meditation, it's on our YouTube channel. It's for free. Okay, Maharic Shield Activation, D12 activation to remove the seal on your phase lock Merkaba. Jehovian seals have to be removed. Flame body activations, that's the answer. We also have a J seal removal technique on our channel. After which you can progress to more advanced techniques, which I will talk about in future segments. And most techniques are available through our YouTube and through Telegram channel, our Telegram channel, or other Telegram channel. It doesn't matter where you get it from, but as long as you get the original techniques. Now, on a final note, we're here to, and I'm sorry this segment went a bit longer than an hour. I think we're coming on to an hour and a half, but I felt like it's needed to be included in one segment. So on a final note, we're here to guide anyone who needs guidance and healing, or who wants to commit to soul integrative work. My guidance in the primary areas of genome healing, inner child healing, and spiritual Bio-regensis. Anyone who's interested can look at our membership area soon, not available at the moment, but soon. I will personally be live streaming on important topics like integrative healing, inner child, trauma releasing shadow work, meditation practices, light body activations, sound healings, educational information sessions, empowerment, emotional and mental, balancing, chakra healing, physical and movement therapy, and more. There will also be a focus on Kathara healing techniques as well as other forms and modalities of healing, pineal transduction and LTRs. And during the lives, there will be an opportunity for Q&As, live interaction, as well as personal support and mentoring, which is optional. And in some instances, we will provide energy movement facilitation techniques that Matt and I developed, in addition to nutritional tips and support to support health and well-being and regeneration of the organic template. I'm not one to leave the physical body behind. In fact, anyone who preaches to leave the physical body and just do spiritual work is clearly very misguided, because in the physical is where everything converges and comes together. Okay, it's only through a healthy template that your light body can be accessed. Now, if your physical body is troubled and pain and you have problems, you can still access your light body. You can still do flame body activations. But what I'm saying, it's more effective if you heal your physical body and then the flow of energy is not impeded. Physical movement that we teach in those guidance sessions will be fun, and it's for everybody, and it will be included. Essentially, it's an opportunity, these guiding sessions, opportunity to heal your mind, body and soul, the whole template, and restore original genetic codex. So it's not for everybody. Okay, it's only for those who sincerely and with dedication want to connect with themselves and with other like-minded people to learn to evolve, and not just to come and gather information or come and gather tips on how to run their own healing work and stuff, because we've had a lot of that infiltration too. So if interested, please let me know in the comments below, and or send an email to collectiverising@protonmail.com, and I will be giving you updates about in relation to when this will be starting. And we envision around October, November, or if not this year, it'll definitely be early next year. I'm hoping end of October, early November. Okay, this is it for this podcast. Thank you for staying with me to the end. I will see you next time. Take good care of yourself and stay connected to your Christic and highest self. Only love.